Welcome back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're down here at Lexington Market. Don Moeller running shotgun here. And I'll tell you what, we've got two more segments. We're talking about running for mayor. Thiru Vignarajah joining us here, and the bloodshed. You got. I think when we left, we were talking about flying planes around and surveillance and safety and the Martin O'Malley era. And this is number one, right? The crime. You're leading with the crime plan.
It certainly is the priority that prevents all the other priorities from even being talked about.
So let's talk a little bit about and Nestor and I joke the guests we have come on, their backgrounds are amazing. I look at yours. You mentioned Harvard, Yale, Harvard, president of the Harvard Law Review. I mean, not everybody. Was Barack Obama the president of the Harvard Law Review?
He was. There's exactly been two presidents of the Harvard Law Review that have run for office. One of them is Barack Obama, and I'm the second one.
There you go. So two for public office. What'd you learn when you were the president of the Harvard Law? What'd you learn through all that education that's with you today?
Yeah. I can tell you that's not where I learned how to fight crime. It's not where I learned how the struggles of the people of Baltimore are addressed. But I did learn something about being a steward for something bigger than yourself. When you're president of the Harvard Law Review, you inherit this history that is as rich and storied as any. The people that were on there, Charles Hamilton Houston, the dean that discovered Thurgood Marshall, Barack Obama, these extraordinary figures in American history were in the same halls.
Do you all have like a secret handshake or anything? Do you and Barack hang out? Is there a sign?
President Obama, I call him every week. He has not returned my calls. I don't know.
But your sister can get through.
My sister was the policy director for Michelle Obama.
You at least have a picture with him.
I do have a picture.
Oh, yeah. So you haven't shot hoops with him, though.
We have not shot hoops. That's exactly right.
I'm trying to get somebody, the guy
that is how I lose his endorsement if I try to shoot hoops with a.
Really?
I have an okay jumper, but the guy can. I think
he's a real player.
He can go out and bury 3-pointers at the drop. In addition to the whole Harvard Law Review thing, you and I talked one time up at Rocky Gap at a Democratic function about your experience at Woodlawn High, a school that I know very, very well. Obviously spent 30 years in the Baltimore County Public Schools.
The Warriors.
Knowing very well that Woodlawn, with its rich history, is also a school that has had its share of challenges. And you and your sister, in a school that had its share of challenges, along with its successes, were straight A students. You were able to sort of block out all of the clutter. Talk to our listeners about what it was in the Vignarajah home that allowed you and your sister to just be excellent when others around you may not have
we both
been.
have Baltimore County educations. Look what happened to you.
Right. Describe how that happened.
That's an incredibly kind thing to say. And the answer to this is very simple. It was our parents.
We hear it over and over, don't we, Nestor?
We didn't live the American dream. My parents lived the American dream. They came over here in their early 40s with the clothes on their back, fleeing a civil war on the other side of the world, with thick accents, but this twinkle in their eye. And they believed that this country was a country where you could work hard and be honest and build a family and earn a living and make the lives of your children a little bit better than your own. And my mom, who, was born a generation ahead of her time, didn't want to get married, begrudgingly married my father, finally settles down and becomes a teacher at Poly and goes on to get her PhD at 62, goes and finishes her career at Morgan State living her dream. My father teaches every day for 37 years in the Baltimore City public schools. After 17
what did he
years,
teach?
He was a math teacher.
And then
every once in a while he'd get bored and he'd teach like physics or
chemistry. He would have been the guy I would have been over trying to figure out algebra 2 with.
Right.
Mr. Vignarajah, can I come over?
They called him Mr. V.
Mr. V. There you go. Nestor would have needed Mr. V.
And
I needed Mr. Moeller.
And the house that I grew up in, the tradition was hard work, gratitude. You didn't take anything for granted. We knew what our cousins were facing on the other side of the world. We knew how lucky we were to even have a chance to be here, and you had to earn it. You had to earn it. My parents, I'd come home with straight A's from Woodlawn, and he would say, "I know that you didn't do any homework, so don't tell me that you're impressing me with your report card. Get back and do something."
He made
more."
you go up and do home. I
did.
remember you telling that story.
Yeah.
You came home with straight A's, and your dad wasn't happy you weren't working hard.
Well,
and rather than take you to dinner to celebrate, he made you go up and
what
study
was
more.
fun for your family and making your parents proud was your work ethic
Yeah.
and living their dream.
Yeah.
That was fun for you.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was
Yeah.
playing ball, chasing girls,
Yeah.
rock and roll. I mean, Don knew me when I was 15, right? But
I was playing ball as well. I just wasn't hitting as many jumpers.
right. But there were look. I had friends that went to Ivy League schools and had 1,600 on their SAT. I was part of the gifted and talented periphery. I was friends with those kids. You know what I mean? I knew those.
You knew
kids.
Frank.
We let you hang out with
I
us.
knew
but
Frank Vanek with his 1590 SAT and his Virginia. I mean, I grew up with brilliant people that were. I found out recently, bust in.
Yeah.
It was a gifted and talented program where the kids from Perry Hall.
Yeah.
It was. Were you offered that at Baltimore? Did you have a chance to go to a GATE program or wing out to Lansdowne or you know where the gifted and talented program was, right?
This was just old school Woodlawn. It was our local school. We went there on Edmondson Heights Elementary, Johnny Cake Middle, and then
Some
Woodlawn
great
High.
But you were to
Yeah.
get into biology class, though. No?
Look, no.
Trigonometry?
I took hard classes. I worked hard, but it just, I joke about this. Woodlawn was where I learned how to make friends. I was an outgoing person. My friends from high school are some of my closest friends in the world. We have a reunion every year. That's where I learned how to make friends. I got to college, and I learned that making friends was not good enough to try to get good grades in college. I mean, college was hard for me. Woodlawn was not a college preparatory school. We had, Eric Chestnut was shot my sophomore year. He came back to school a few months after recovering and was killed. This was a tough time for Woodlawn High School.
What years are we talking?
I graduated in 94.
94.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a little older
So
than me.
let's, what, it's interesting. We always say we never go in a straight line on Baltimore Positive.
Yeah.
But for those of us following the really contentious debate in Howard County right now regarding school redistricting, and we know how difficult, again, discussions of race are. But out of that comes this realization that years and years after Brown versus Board of Education, in many ways, our schools are more segregated than ever. Yet you, as a teenager back in the early 90s, went to a school that was extremely diverse.
Yeah.
How did that form who you are?
Yeah, when I was clerking for Justice Breyer, we worked on a case, and we had to report to the world that America's public schools are more segregated today than they have been since 1968. And Baltimore City, you see it everywhere. Now, Woodlawn was a special place. It was predominantly African American, but you had people of lots of different backgrounds, socioeconomic classes, all coming together and playing basketball together. I led my soccer team to a 1-42 record. We were coming together to do what Thurgood Marshall dreamed of. He had this great line in a Supreme Court decision. He said, "If our children do not begin to learn together, there is little hope our people will ever learn to live together." And that was what was happening at some schools back then. And then I went to a very different place. The truth is, Don, I have been in rooms during this campaign that are all white, and I have been in rooms that are all black. There are too many rooms in Baltimore that are like that. But I'm always the only South Asian Hindu in the room. And so I, in some respects, one of the reasons I think we are trying so hard to transcend race is not just because the issues cut across, but my biography, my identity does not fit into this checkerboard sense of how we talk about cities. When my parents did not allow me to fail, but at Yale I struggled. And I had to find my voice. And when I remember when
there wasn't diversity there. I bet not a lot of folks went to Woodlawn at Yale, right?
No, there was not.
That background probably served you well and probably hindered you to some degree.
Sure, that's exactly right. And I hadn't learned how to study. I hadn't learned how to write. When I got to law school, I told myself, no more excuses. No more blaming your immigrant past. No more blaming your tough public high school. Work your tail off and see what happens. And that is the lesson I tell people, which is we know that if you work hard, and you're honest and you focus on the right goals and the right ideals, anything is possible. I'll tell you one more positive story. We can talk about crime. Thurgood Marshall, I made a couple of references.
Sure.
People need to know the history of this man as it connects to this city. Thurgood Marshall went to Frederick Douglass High School. And after he graduated Douglass High School, this is where my dad taught. After he graduated Douglass High School, he went to Lincoln University. And after Lincoln, he wanted to come back to the flagship law school in his home city, in Baltimore City. But of course, the University of Maryland Law School, right around the corner, wouldn't admit blacks back then. So he went down to Howard Law School, down in D.C., and there he met Charles Hamilton Houston, the dean of Howard Law School. I alluded to him earlier. In the Harvard Law Review building up in Cambridge, they have pictures of every class, but they only have one portrait. It's not of Barack Obama. It's not of any of the Supreme Court justices. It's of Dean Houston. And the reason is not because he was the first African-American editor of the Harvard Law Review. It's because he's the one who discovered Thurgood Marshall. So when he's dean and Thurgood Marshall is a first-year student, he sees this kid from Baltimore who is a little bit of a bully, and he's arrogant, but he is the smartest, best writer, best oralist he's ever seen, and he tutors him and he mentors him. Thurgood Marshall graduates in the top of his class, could go and do anything, go to a fancy law firm in D.C., go to some clerkships. He says to the dean, I don't want to do any of that. I want to go back to Baltimore and I want to fight. So he comes down to Baltimore, comes back to his home city, hangs up a shingle at Redwood Street, right downtown. And on the corner of Redwood and Charles, you know where that Kinko's is?
Yeah, I know where.
Yep. So at the back of that Kinko's, it's not even a plaque. I'm gonna change that. The back of that Kinko's, he hangs up a shingle, and fresh out of law school, he files a lawsuit against the University of Maryland for not admitting blacks. He makes an argument no lawyer has ever made before. He makes an argument no court has ever accepted before, and he wins. The University of Maryland Law School becomes the first law school in America that is desegregated by an order of the court by Maryland's highest court. And the same argument he makes in 1932, at the age of 24, at the Court of Appeals of Maryland, is the argument he makes when he argues Brown versus Board of Education before the United States Supreme Court 20 years later. That kid was from Baltimore. And so when I think about the promise that is in these schools, that are in these kids, I'm one story. My sister went to Yale and Yale Law School, Marshall Scholar.
Well, it was also his fight for change.
Absolutely.
Right? And that it had to happen here.
That's exactly right. And by the way, he would be proud that we're still sitting here fighting. He'd be proud of the diversity he sees in Lexington Market. It is absolutely true. White people and black people and people of all different backgrounds, they work here, they eat here, they congregate here, but too much of this city he would be ashamed of. He'd be ashamed of the schools that we have left for our children. He'd be ashamed of how complacent we have become about crime. And that is a legacy that I think we have to lift up again.
I mean, we had Senator Bill Ferguson on, the Senate president, not long ago. And he talked about when he and his wife were teaching in a city school, he had to go in and shovel snow one day
inside the classroom
before the kids could learn. We would never, as I pointed out, we would never tolerate that in other schools.
And the same schools that are segregated by race today are the schools that don't have air conditioning. So you got to let them out early during the heat. They're the schools that don't have heat. So you got to let them out when it's too cold. They're the same schools that have lead in the pipes underneath them, so you can't drink water from the water fountains. Those are the schools that we expect to educate the children of Baltimore. And then we sit here and wonder why things are going badly. You wonder why we're the only city in America that next year will be smaller in 2020 than we were in 1920. I mean,
I sense Nestor, and I'm looking at Nestor. He gets this gleam in his eye. As you talk, there's an urgency. There's a sense of now. Yeah. There's a passion. And what Nestor, early in this series, he asked me one time, he said, what do elected leaders, when you look at elected leaders, ones who have been effective, I like to think I had a little bit of this, but certainly others excelled in it, is, to me, it's a hatred of incompetence. Yes. You've got to hate incompetence and not tolerate it. Yeah. And you better care about the small stuff. Yeah. That old book, it sounds trite, but you talked about potholes and graffiti. You better care about the small
services,
stuff.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's it.
And it's symbols that our citizens see about how much our leaders care about our city. If you are running over the same potholes over and over again and you're calling 311 and it's not getting fixed, you send a message to your citizens that you don't care. that you don't think potholes matter. But if you go to the nice cities, if you go to the nice parts of our city, there's no potholes. There's no those things.
And that's
it's a message.
That's a problem.
Yep.
That's a problem that a pothole gets fixed in 3 days in Roland Park
Yep.
and 3 years in Patterson Park or wherever.
That's exactly right.
You know what? So that we can totally focus, and I know we have a hard stop because Nestor and I are on to other interviews today. So we don't rush it. Why don't we take a break here,
let's do
come
it.
back, and really drill down on
All
the
right,
crime?
let's go to the crime thing. All right, Thiru Vignarajah is here. We're at Fadley's in Lexington Market.
Who else sponsors this?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're
crazy
going to be
show?
at State Fair next week. We got a double dose next week. We have education with Sonia Santalese, and we have Speaker
of the House, Adrian Jones.
And Commissioner Harrison's going to join us next month here at Fadley's as well.
You just had Matt Skura at Jennings.
Nothing more positive than Matt Skura and the first place Ravens. I hope they're first place by the time people see this.
Go Lamar.
I love it.
We'll be right back.
Thiru Vignarajah here. We're at WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Baltimore Positive. Back for more from Fadley's.